Hi everyone, my name is Woodland, and I'm so excited to be here to talk with you guys today about one of my favorite topics, which is the heart. The heart is such an incredible organ. It keeps us alive, it never rests, and the more I learn about how it works, is the more fascinated I become with it. So in this video, I'm going to just walk you through the cardiac cycle, what it is, how it works, and why it's really important. And so we'll break down each phase of the heartbeat. We're going to be talking about the blood flow, the pressure, the heart sounds, and finally, we're going to be doing some calculations at the end. Um, and so let's get started. Starting off with section one, we're going to start off with the basics. So, what is the cardiac cycle? The cardiac cycle is the complete sequence of events in the heart from the start of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next. And this is made up of systole, which is the contraction, and diastole, which is relaxation. As you can see in the middle picture here, the systolic phase is when the heart contracts, the blood pressure rises, and the blood moves out along the vessels. As you guys can see by the arrows, they're moving outward, going to different parts of the body. And then we have the diastolic phase, which is the heart relaxes, the blood pressure fails, and the blood fills the heart, which is why the arrows are coming in, because the blood is coming in. Okay, so we have the atrial systole and the atrial diastole. This is where the upper chambers, which is the atria, in the third GIF/video, but it's a GIF, you can see the atria is contracting and relaxing. And then the ventricle systole and the ventricle diastole, this is where the lower chambers, as you can see, these two open ones here that are contracting and relaxing. These steps create pressure changes that control the blood flow and the valve movement, which we'll be speaking about later on in the video. Okay, so for section two, this is going to be in at least 6 phases. This is part one here. So we have the ventricular filling. So during the ventricular diastole, the ventricles are relaxed and pressure gradients, they favor the blood flow from the atria into the ventricles. Um, I don't know if you guys can clearly see what I'm talking about here, but if you see that blue line that's outlining the valve, I don't know if you guys can see the valve opening. This is right here. This is the ventricles. So this is part of the lower chamber of the heart, right? Okay. So we have the AV valves, the tricuspid and the mitral. They're open. So while the semilunar valves are closed, they're open. This phase is quiet, there's no heart sounds, and on the EKG, if you guys can see that, it's after the T wave and before the P wave. Um, so for the second one, we have the atrial contraction. So we're hitting now the atrial systole. The atria contract. It's giving that final push of blood into the ventricles, and it's like, how can I say? It's like a top off, like especially when you're exercising, and it's just your heart's like beating super super fast. So this is basically, I don't know if you guys could clearly see it, but I can always attach this photo to um, the description box so that you'll be able to see it clearly. So yes, the P wave on the EKG or the ECG, this would show contraction, but there's still no heart sounds as of yet. And then this is actually very, very cool. This is actually one of my favorite parts. This is the ischiovolumetric contraction, or ischiovolumetric contraction. So this is when the ventricular systole begins. But all the valves, they're closed, so no blood is moving yet. the ventricles are squeezing, but they haven't opened the valves. So the pressure would rise very, very rapidly, eventually becoming really great in the pressure in the arteries. And then you would hear the heart sound, which is lub. Um, so that's when the AV valves snap shut, and then you would see that on the EKG. Okay, so moving on to section 2, I did put the ventricle ejection and the isovolumetric relaxation together because I looked everywhere and I could not find a photo that showed or a GIF that showed isovolumetric relaxation. So I did find a GIF that showed both, or I should say the whole cardiac cycle. So I put that together. But I'll explain both. So the ventricular ejection, this is when the ventricular pressure exceeds the pressure in the aorta and the pulmonary artery. So the semilunar valves would open, the blood rushes out, and then, that would be the ejection. So, but this is still during the ventricle systole stage, and you would see that on the EKG. So for the isovolumetric relaxation, this is when the ventricles begin to relax, which is the ventricular diastole, which we spoke about, and the pressure inside them would drop. So once it's lower than the arterial pressure, the semilunar valves, they would slam shut, and this would cause the second sound, which is dub. So now that all the valves are now closed again and we're back in a quiet pause, then it ends with a T wave. So we have lub, dub, lub, dub, if that makes sense. Okay, I did add 2 other GIFs just to see the different phases and what the heart looks like while it's in those phases. And as you can see in the third photo, we have when they give you like when how long it takes for each to happen. So this is when the ventricles relax and the atrial is full. It would be like 0.7 seconds. That's on the left side. In the middle, which is the heart, it shows what's going on, what's happening, where the blood's going through. And then on the right side, we have the ECG, um, the aortic pressure, the ventricle pressure, the atrial pressure, the ventricular volume, the heart sound. So this is a really good way to see what the heart is doing. And in the middle here, we have the different phases. I found this very, very cool and very, very interesting as well because it just, you see how it has like that dial on the bottom where it has the atrial diastole, the ventricle systole, the atrial diastole, and the ventricle diastole. Helps you to know what the heart looks like when it's contracting and what it looks like when it's relaxed. So it gives you the different phases. The arrows are actually very, very helpful in knowing where the blood is going. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. Okay, so we have now moved on to section 3, where we will talk about the pressure gradients. And this is really what makes the whole cycle possible. So the blood flows from a high pressure to a low pressure. Unfortunately, I was not able to find a really good GIF or a picture that shows that. So I had to make one my own. As you guys can see, it's not the best, but I would try to explain it. So the words are obviously not clearly shown here. I don't know how to fix that. I'm sorry. But basically, the words are higher pressure and then lower pressure. So when the arrows are going up, um, you would see that at the lower chamber of the heart, it's a lower pressure, and at the upper chamber of the heart, it would be a higher pressure. And when the arrows are going down, it would be a higher pressure at the lower chamber, and in the upper chamber of the heart, it would be a lower pressure. But I will try to explain it a bit easier. So when the atrial pressure exceeds the ventricular pressure, the AV valves open. And so when the ventricular pressure exceeds the atrial pressure, the AV valves would shut. Also, when the ventricular pressure exceeds arterial pressure, semilunar valves would open, and when the arterial pressure becomes greater than the ventricular pressure again, the semilunar valves would close. I see it as a dance of pressure of opening and closing doors. It's just one is opening, one is closing, one is closing, one is opening. And so these pressure driven valve actions would create the two heart sounds we hear with the stethoscope, which would be lub and dub, as we spoken about in section 2. Okay, so we are now at section 4, the last section, the hardest section for me, as we do have a little math to do. So we're going to be speaking about the EDV, the ESV, and the SV. So on our left-hand side, we have some definitions. So the end diastolic volume, which is the EDV, is the volume of blood in the ventricle at the end of the diastole. So this is just before a contraction. This would typically be around 120 milliliters. For the ESV, we have the end systolic volume, and this is what's left after the contraction, and this would usually be about 50 milliliters. And for the stroke volume, which is SV, this is the amount of blood pumped out with each beat, with each lub dub. So you would calculate it by subtracting the ESV from the EDV. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we have SV equals EDV minus ESV, right? So for example, if the EDV is 120 milliliters and the ESV is 50 milliliters, we would do 120 minus 50, which equals 70, and that would be 70 milliliters. For the cardiac output, that's the volume, the CO, that's the volume of blood pumped by one ventricle per minute. So this would be multiplication. So we have the HR multiplied by the SV, which is the stroke volume. So HR is heart rate. So if the heart rate is 75 beats per minute, right, and the stroke volume is 70 milliliters, we would do 75 times 70, which then gives us 5,250 milliliters. And then we would put our decimal there, and it would be 5.25 liters per minute, right? So if the HR, or I should say the heart rate, if the heart rate increases like during like exercise, or if the stroke volume increases, like when you're, exercising, the CO will go up. But if someone is dehydrated or has heart damage, heart failure, the stroke volume would go down and the CO, the cardiac output, would drop, and this would affect the tissue oxygenation. So we have come to a close. Hopefully you understand the cardiac cycle and that it isn't just like, a heartbeat, and we take a lot of things for granted. We're walking around, our heart is beating, we're sleeping, heart is beating, we're eating, heart is beating. A lot of times we'll joke around and say, my heart almost dropped, or my heart almost stopped, or I almost had a heart attack. But really, when we understand the body mechanics of it and understanding how it works and going through each, stage, each phase, ventricular filling, the atrial contraction, all these, it really gives us, great appreciation. So hopefully you guys understood, and thank you very much.